What is TPP, Trans-Pacific Partnership? The TPP agreement is a powerful trade agreement that is being secretly negotiated between 9 countries: the United States, Australia, Peru, Malaysia, Vietnam, New Zealand, Chile, Singapore, and Brunei. Mexico, Canada, and Japan are in the process of joining it. The United States is pushing SOPA and ACTA-like policies onto the rest of the world, forcing them to sacrifice free speech and privacy in exchange for access to commodity markets like tobacco and textiles. Two main issues. 1. Hollywood. The leaked IP chapter shows how deep-pocketed Hollywood and pricey lobbyists are pushing for IP restrictions that will choke free speech, innovation, privacy, and digital rights. 2. The public is locked out of the negotiations. The meetings are all behind closed doors and the text is kept secret. There is no public discussion and no congressional involvement. U.S. copyright law is deeply flawed, but we've got a few checks and balances that make it better. Fair use to protect speech. For example, parody, satire, and commentary. Fair use is also essential to search engines allowing thumbnails and excerpts, allowing people to find information online. Statutory exemptions, like letting teachers use copyrighted materials in face-to-face classrooms, reproductions for libraries and archives. Through the U.S. court system, judges have held that certain temporary copies can be made without permission, upholding a crucial function for digital devices. But with TPP, the United States is trying to export the worst parts of its intellectual property law without bringing any of the above protections. If TPP passes, it will be even harder to fix the existing problems in U.S. copyright law. For example, right now, folks who break digital locks on software can be criminalized for using circumvention tools to access lockdown content, even for legal use. We're working to fix some of the problems this law creates. For example, working to keep it legal to jailbreak your phone, but we have a long way to go, like adding protections for blind people who use special technology to access content. TPP will include similar anti-circumvention provisions to make it more difficult to fix U.S. law. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce and other negotiating interests are pushing for fast-track legislative approval that will tie the hands of Congress from debating or changing any of the provisions after it's been drafted behind closed doors. TPP will undermine innovation around the world, kicking the latter out from under developing countries. Nations will have to pay high fees in royalties and costs for enforcing these overreaching restrictive copyright laws. This will be a harder hit for developing countries that already lack enough resources for domestic needs. Civil and criminal consequences. Copyright owners can demand your domain or have your computer seized if it's found to be connected to infringing activity, whether you actually participated or not. You can even go to jail. Infringement claims under TPP restrict your economic, property, and personal freedoms. Undermining the public domain. Right now, international agreements allow copyrighted works to pass into the public domain no less than 50 years after the death of the creators. This is already ridiculous. TPP would push this even farther, preventing copyrighted works from reaching the public domain for 70 years after the author's death. What you can do. If you're in the United States, call on congressional representatives to demand transparency of the text and the objectives they're seeking in the agreement. Call on the White House to drop the IP chapter of TPP. Call on negotiators to make sure the text includes provisions that meet the needs of all stakeholders, not just a few industries. Spread the word. Tell your friends, family, and coworkers about TPP. Show them how they can contact their representatives. For more information and to take action, visit www.eff.org/issues/TPP.